Hello, everybody, and welcome to Loremaster's Investigation, where we ponder the universal questions of tabletop role playing games. I'm Cody.
And I'm Joe, and welcome to the tower.
Yeah, our floating castle in the sky. Our
Yeah,
floating,
so it's,
moving castle. Got one on you, Howl. Just think about that for a second.
I mean, that's pretty wild, right?
Uh
Yeah.
huh. So, how have you been?
Oh, I've been all right. Keeping things keeping things nerdy, reading comics and watching
Nice.
some old movies and things like that. How about you? How have you been?
I've been well. I got to try out a new MMO called New World that's
Oh yeah?
being funded by Amazon, and supposedly the people who are working on it are like low key working on the Lord of the Rings MMO. So like
Huh.
got some really cool stuff there. They did push it back, so it's a little like ooh, like I'm not sure how I feel about the game so far, but my experience with it has been good.
Mhm.
But
Nice. Yeah.
anyways, I hear
Yeah.
I hear Bookie off in the distance. Is he still mad at me? Do you know?
Yeah, 100%. Boogie's Matt. You pulled out Boogie's pages. That's
Yeah,
like not a
I mean, to be fair, you told me to do that, and much like a good faithful podcast host, if you tell me to jump, I ask how high.
I never told you to pull out the pages.
I mean, someone can fact check me, but I feel
I just said
like you
open the
set me.
book. Oh, hey, Bookie. Oh, Bookie. Yes,
all
I
in
I'll open you up this week. And Bookie
Yeah.
opens up very reluctantly. It's, hey guys. It says here, um, I'm curious about house rules. What are some house rules that you guys, what are some house rules? Let's talk about house rules.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was a weirdly phrased question.
I mean, hey, I wasn't
Definitely
gonna say
person who
anything.
didn't like person who wrote in who's definitely not me. Like,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah. So hey, can I start off with a little prepared statement?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So over time, it kind of seems inevitable that you and your party will try to, add your own rules or tweak your own rules. Um, as we get comfortable with sort of the base system, I think we all start kind of seeing little things that we wish were a little different here and there, things that maybe aren't working well for your particular table, and we always try to find ways or try to find things to kind of keep the game punchy and enjoyable. And so um as is a lot of things involving oh boy, as it's a lot of things involving house rules and things like that. It's always important to like stay flexible and things like that. But I have here a couple questions for you about this topic. Do you have a couple
Yeah,
questions for me?
I do.
Okay. Well, how about I start with a question for you, Cody?
Sure.
So, what do you look for when you're trying to find new house rules to introduce to your party?
So okay, so uh this is an interesting one. Um so most of the time I feel like, at least for me, house rules are there to change something about the game that you're playing, to evoke the kind of gameplay that suits you. So like,
Mhm. Mhm.
for instance, a lot of people tend to take out the annoying encumbrance rules, because adding up your weight and then figuring out what your weight modifier is kind of it's a chore.
Yeah.
And while on one hand there's balance there and being like, well, it's so that people can't carry around 19 scimitars along with all their other shit and selling it, like, you kind of, there's risk reward there, but like, a lot of times house rules are there to solve a problem, right? Like, you have a problem with the game's almost there. Like, for me, I love D&D because it was built in a very modular way in most
Mhm.
cases, I would say, with the exception of some of like the weird nuanced magic rules and whatnot. But it's very modular in that if I want to change something, it's not super difficult for me to do that. And basically, the long way around this answer is I'm usually trying to either evoke some kind of gameplay behavior or gameplay mechanic, or I'm trying to solve a problem that I have with the current design. So like,
Mhm.
for instance, one issue I had with Dungeons and Dragons initiative system, which is basically how you figure out who goes first in combat, is base rules. You roll a d20, you add your dex and any kind of bonuses you get to that score, and that's it. You are stuck in that rigid uh you're stuck in that rigid initiative for the remainder of the fight unless the DM for whatever reason were to call for it again.
Yeah.
And to me, that's it becomes problematic because anyone who's at the bottom, they basically just have to sit there and watch as stuff happens. There's no, this is a team game, and in Dungeons and Dragons Fifth, it's kind of like Team Warhammer, right? Like, the
Mhm.
the 4, 5, or 6 of you are working together to fight the enemies, and so you want tactics. You want to be like, all right, I'm gonna go over here, and then maybe the healer will heal that person, and then move over here, and like it's kind of like a group playing Warhammer for the same team.
Sure.
And the rigid initiative system kind of starts to get away, like it's no longer dynamic, it's very rigid, like, and it sucks for those for both DM and player who get roll the one and they're just last for the remain, like, they're like, if I were to set up a cool boss fight and it's this big giant monster and whatever, and I roll a one on initiative for him. Now I'm stuck letting the players just beat on this boss until finally he can react. And
Mhm.
then by that point, especially with the way they want you to create encounters, that thing's probably dead by that point.
Yeah.
Um
I'll
so
say
I
too,
wanted
if I could jump in for a second, like,
yeah.
um, y once again, specifically with the way that initiative is written kind of like in book, um, there are some classes and there are some races in Dungeons and Dragons that are like automatically going to give you an advantage when it comes to the initiative system. Like, I know that it's still at the end of the day a dice roll, but like as a dwarf cleric, like I think my initiative was at its highest like 3 or something like that. Whereas like, if you're an elf rogue, like that initiative is like if it's not like +7 by like 4th level, then you probably did something wrong at some point. But like,
Yeah, like you get just having that initial +1 bonus at level 1 to initiative can be huge.
yeah,
Even
100%.
if your die roll isn't super great.
And it makes sense because like rogues are supposed to be like sneaky and a little bit quicker and things like that. But still, like it kind of gets boring that the rogue always goes first. Like,
Right.
but anyway, back to what you were saying, Cody.
Well, yeah, I think it boils down to I use house rules to either fix a problem that I currently have with my game, or I find that the game doesn't evoke a certain play style or doesn't evoke certain things. So like with
Hmm.
initiative, it there was a problem that I saw, which was it's really boring and rigid to just be stuck on initiative 10 for an entire battle that could take hours. And so I wanted to fix that problem of it being kind of rigid and boring to me, but also I wanted to evoke a level of cooperation that the initial system wasn't adding. So those two kind of go hand in hand in most cases, but that is ultimately the reason why I house rule.
Hmm.
Uh, for the next question,
Yeah.
what is your least favorite house rule and why?
Ooh, interesting.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, it's funny. I don't think we intended for this to be an initiative episode,
No,
but
no, we didn't. But
um,
when we were setting up, it ended up being that way, huh?
I do feel like initiative is one of the things in the base game that is the wonkiest.
Yeah.
Because it's no surprise to me that it's like, as I peruse various Dungeons and Dragons things, it seems like everyone at some point tries to like, grapple with the idea of initiative and trying to figure out a way to make it a little bit more dynamic. I remember at one point, there was something called like the Gray Greyfriars initiative system or something like that.
Oh, the
I'm forgetting the name of it, where it was like you rolled a d20, and if you're a spellcaster then you got to roll an additional d4, but only if you were spellcasting. And if you were like a martial character but you used ranged weapons, and you were able to add like a d8 or something like that. It was literal insanity, and someone like was like, hey, well, you should try this, and I was like, I'm not good at math, I don't know if my brain could handle this. But anyway, um
yeah. So it's the Greyhawk initiative, and
Greyhawk. I was close
yeah,
with
you know, you were
Greyfriars.
close. That's
That's a
like
church in Edinburgh.
as soon as you said it, I was like, wait, I know that. But yeah, basically, you wanted to roll high on a die, but each thing that you wanted to do determined what die you were rolling. So like arranged, or I'm sorry, you wanted to go lower. You wanted to be as low as possible. And so
Mm.
like a ranged attack was a D4, movement was a D6, a melee attack was a D8. So basically like you would like grab whatever dice you needed. Um at least I think that's how I'm understanding this. And then like, you know, including your dex modifier, and then whoever rolled lowest was basically good to go. But yeah, like it's nonsense. It's I'm looking at it right now, and uh there's initiative count, order, like order of operations, determining the order, like if you want to do
Mhm.
multiple actions.
But
l-
anyway,
yeah,
this
it's a
th
mess.
this is a long diversion to say that we ended up not going with the Greyhawk system.
No.
And we had tried something instead called Popcorn Initiative, which,
Yep.
was basically, anyone could choose anyone else at the table, and if a monster went last, basically, I think it gave the DM the opportunity to, like, trigger all of the other monsters just based on, like, I'm not explaining it well, but basically it was like anyone could choose anyone else at the table, and so, the
Yeah, the
idea was.
caveat to that was if the DM goes last, they get to choose who goes first regardless of picking themselves or not, which is usually
Mm,
something you can't do.
yeah. And basically, like, what I found it ended up doing was a couple of things, which was I found that in a way it kind of created like a high level of metagaming,
Yeah,
which
100%.
was everyone would, at some point it was inevitable that someone would blurt out, "I was like, whoa, wait, 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 wait! If you don't choose X character, then that means that the DM goes last." And it's like, okay,
Yep.
which I don't know, like, it didn't necessarily strike me as like uber fun or anything like that. But I think the other thing too was that it was like, if you had a player at the table that wasn't necessarily paying the closest attention, it seemed like, there was almost kind of like a logical preferential treatment of how the popcorn system worked.
Right.
Um, and it's just, it is what it is, especially if it's a person who doesn't necessarily, they're playing because their friend wants to play, and so they'll let their friend go next or something like that. But it seemed like sometimes strategy went out the window a little bit, um, which was weird because like seemed like it was a good system designed for that. But yeah, Popcorn Initiative wasn't my favorite system that we had used for initiative.
Yeah, it solved one problem but then added a bunch of new problems that until I had tried it out was
Yeah.
didn't know they even existed. But yeah, there's a little bit, it's the awkward, like, I want when I initially started it, because I think that was our first or second iteration of what initiative was,
The first iteration was that we had to roll new initiative at the top of every round,
which
and
created one of the worst problems, which made combat last double the time, because asking six people to roll initiative and then the DM also rolling initiative for every
however
monster
many monsters, yeah.
is a nightmare.
I remember you having, like, little note cards that you laid on the DM screen and that you would have to reorganize every round,
Yeah,
and
it was the worst, probably arguably the worst house rule that I ever invoked.
I mean, yeah, I now that I'm thinking
But
about it,
like,
maybe
but
that takes the
popcorn,
cake,
but that
but
that was only one problem, right? Like that, it
yeah.
okay, it made game too long, which is fine. It's not, it didn't make up for the fact that, there was. But yeah, popcorn initiative was like, sure, you could use teamwork and stuff, but like, ultimately what ended up happening was this kind of weird game of chess between the players and the DM,
Mhm.
where you needed to give the DM a turn so that they could give it to the players so that they could give it back to me, and vice versa. Yeah, it was this weird metagamey dance that we did. It's almost kind of like the Ranger caveat, where
Mm.
if someone wants to play the Ranger in 5th edition, it's like, all right, well, if I'm going to play a Ranger, I have to pick my favorite enemy and terrain. What kind of campaign are we doing? And what's it's
Yeah.
that weird mental gymnastics you have to do with the player and DM of like, well, fuck, if I just give them the terrain that they will most likely be in and their favorite enemy is like the constant one, then it's this, it feels broken in favor of the Ranger,
Yeah.
but I'm an asshole if I don't tell them what it is, kind of
Sure.
thing.
Or like,
And
like suddenly, "Oh no, there are no beasts in this
it's
forest." And it's
yeah,
like,
it's weird how all
"Hey,
the undead disappeared.
yeah, what the hell, dude?"
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
weird how
no
the forest
necromancers
has,
in this world, I guess.
yeah, no necromancers. It's weird how that happened. Um but yeah, that was the thing about Popcorn Initiative. It was another game of mental gymnastics with the players, and I don't like to play the I don't like to be an antagonistic DM. Like,
Mhm.
I'm here to create situations that test you but also like make you feel like badasses when like you get through them, and like, so like, to me it felt like that antagonistic style of DMing that like usually drives me batshit crazy.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and I think that that question kind of leans into my next question for
Yeah.
you, which is like, how many sessions are you willing to give a house rule before tweaking it or scrapping it?
You know, this is tough. I think it kind of boils down to, it depends on the house rule. Um, because I think in a lot of cases, you like I said before, you're usually trying to fix something that's broken, or you're trying to evoke a certain thing, right? And sometimes, like with re-rolling initiative, I think we did that once or twice, and I was like, I'm so fucking done with this. This created more problems than it solved.
Yeah.
But with popcorn, we did that for a while before we came to our fast slow initiative. So, and at the time, like when I first started using it, it felt great because it was solving that one issue of like combat taking so long. But
Mhm.
then as we played more, like you said, it created this weird dynamic between the players and the dungeon master, but also creating this weird dynamic between the players when like a little bit of that favoritism leaked over into the game.
Mhm.
Um, which is something that I didn't see right away. And that, but then all of a sudden I was like, wait, we've done 4 battles in the system, and the turn order has kind of become person A, person B, person C
Mhm.
almost always, unless there's like a cool plan or whatever. So, um, it really depends. If you use it a lot and you're finding that it doesn't, like initiative, if you're a combat heavy game, you can probably figure out if it's going to be good for your table after 1 or 2 sessions.
Mhm.
But if it's something that is kind of either not used as much, or perhaps something that's like a little lighter, like something that isn't quite as heavy as like we're going to completely change the way I added a house. I guess this is a house rule, but it's based off of stuff I've got in Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, where you guys, because you're in a very specific faction, you get access to spells and abilities and stuff.
Mm, mhm.
And that's a little lighter. I mean, ultimately, it gives you guys access to more spells, which, some may argue that it's, like, oh, it's broken. They can do so much more. But it's like, yeah, but now I can increase the power level of what I throw at them, and I don't have to worry because they have answers to it. And so I can scale, I can go into deadly encounters and it'll feel like a medium encounter to you guys because you guys have options. But then, there's weight to those to those combats, like when you guys raided that 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 thieves guild, or
That warehouse.
that warehouse filled with guys, like there were tons of people with fantasy guns. And
Mhm.
if I were to put a regular 6-man party in there without the buffs that you guys already had, they would have been shredded, absolutely torn apart, TPK within the first 5 rounds. But you guys have a bunch of cool abilities and stuff, so like I can do that kind of stuff and not have to worry about it, and that's fun.
Mhm.
So like, would I change that? Probably not. But like, it took me a long time to see how that house rule played out in order to
Yeah.
fully see it. So it really depends on the thing. But ultimately, if you're going to use it at least once or twice a game, I can usually kind of figure that out within the first like 1, 2 sessions. But the less you use it, or the less impact it has on the game, the more time I need to like sit there and really think, do I need this anymore? Or
Yeah. I understand that.
yeah. Um Kind of pivoting to a same topic, but um a different mode of thinking, I guess. If you could introduce a house rule into our current game where you guys
Mm.
are fantasy special investigators, what would it be and why? It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be mechanically sound or anything, or like whatever. It just like what do you think, now that we're talking about like what house rules do, what would you like if you were in charge of being the DM for this? What is a house rule
Mhm.
that you think would help enhance the game?
You know, I've been thinking a lot about the idea of like conspiracies and how conspiracies work,
Yeah,
and maybe like a sort of conspiracy board, like maybe like group check almost,
sure.
where so like in this game we're investigating things, and things along those, we're investigating like a mystery and things along those lines, and sometimes it just feels like, I mean, sometimes I personally feel like a little directionless sometimes,
Sure.
um, which is, a little by design, because it's not like a conspiracy theory is just gonna jump out right
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
front of you or things like that. Like sometimes you have to follow breadcrumb trails, um, or things along those lines. And I know that you've like introduced some mechanics, like there's like a red string of destiny that will sometimes pop its little head up in scenarios and things
Oh,
like
that was a
that.
very specific moment, and that was, go on.
Yeah.
That is not something that will happen again, is what I'm getting at. But
Oh,
it
fair
was
enough.
something very specific to that character, but that character never revealed why that was important to you, and never kind of tried to figure it out on their own why it
Okay.
was important to them. But yeah, I see what you're saying though.
And it's nothing that like I personally would have observed. I don't think the character ever mentioned it to anyone.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
like, yeah, I don't know, just like things to sometimes you know, help the party like make these logic or these like crazy leaps.
Yeah,
Um
do the X Files Mulder leap.
yeah, exactly. And I think that not necessarily even in a way that would break the game that we're playing currently, because I think that, if we're revealed like too much information
Sure,
or things like that, then hey, that's that's kind of solving, maybe making a new problem by solving another problem, or taking away some of the, the like the spider web that Cody is weaving for us in our party.
sure,
Um, but yeah, just something like, to help bridge those gaps, or point in individual directions or things like that. I know you're fond of creating like a very dynamic um uh what's the word I'm looking for? Dynamic world where things are occurring. It's not like, the world is just kind of standing still until we walk through the scene, and then,
right, right.
like that marketplace is always going to be hustling and bustling. It's not like everyone's standing there static, and then the party walks through and you hear noise and everything, and then we step off of the lot and everyone's like back to being frozen or whatever. So, I think it's interesting, especially in the situation that we're in right now, um that like I don't know if we went the direction you are intending us to go, but you established such a credible threat in the guns that like we ha- w- I feel like no one was objecting to taking care of that problem, you know?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think everyone was on the same. Well, because it became a problem, right? Like
Mhm.
stuff had happened in the game, and to not like bore people with like a bunch of like what ifs or whatever. But basically,
Uh,
in our game that we're currently running, Joe's character had co-developed the very first fantasy revolver,
mhm.
and in turn, because of the events of what's going on in the world, bad people got a hold of these guns. And so now their current quest is to deal or try to like figure out how to deal with this new threat of like a bunch of thugs basically having the firearms that the police were supposed to have in this fantasy town.
And like, I know from previous experience that like if we had even done one other, mission or even subquest, like how exponentially worse it could have gotten, um
Yep.
with these things continuing to be spread out across the and so, I think that in this case, like I'm not sure how this connects to this main conspiracy. It's kind of unraveling some more threads. It's maybe introducing some more threats than we were originally aware of, or at the very least like showing us how deep the rot goes. But still like having sort of like a almost like maybe like a the conspiracy room or something,
Sure.
where
Yeah, like a
like
board where you guys can like look at that stuff. And it's funny that you mentioned that. Um, because I was having a conversation about this with another player at the table, and both of us like to weave mysteries where like we feed you breadcrumbs, and we give you the opportunity to do what you like. You solve the case how you want to do it. I don't want to like railroad you by being like, all right, there's a mysterious man down the road who's been eyeing you this whole time. Like, I don't want to like you know, unlike the one shot, I don't want to be heavy handed about how I give you guys the plot or how I move you guys
mhm,
forward. However, I would have never said no to you guys being like, all right, we should like, can we make a check to like figure out what's super important, like what needs to be solved right now, or, much like a conspiracy board.
yeah.
And like, yeah, if you
Well,
it
hey,
doesn't
doesn't
necessarily
matter.
have to be like necessarily a house rule, but like I would I would have been like, fuck yeah, let's, yeah, you guys like make a group check, and I'll give, based on your response, I will tell you like what is probably the most immediate threat, or maybe
Mhm.
like, maybe it's you ask a question about the overall plot, and
Yeah.
I define the DC based on how ridiculous of a request that is. Like maybe it's like, oh, well, yeah, that should be, that's a fairly easy check, or maybe it's really hard, right? Like maybe it's like, who's the villain of this campaign? It's like, well, you don't know that because it's a mysterious threat,
Yeah.
like weaves upon weaves, but like, depending on what you roll, I would at least give you a thread like, oh, like you didn't think about this before, but this person that you talked to once mentioned that thing that you're looking for. Maybe they can help you and kind
Yeah.
of give you a direction and where that goes. But yeah, I like that idea, and I will. This wasn't planned by any means, um, but I am willing to. If you guys do get stuck, you guys can like, yeah, spend a day looking at the conspiracy board, and like, sure,
Yeah.
time will pass, but you'll know where to go, or like, what answer the question that you want answered, kind of a thing.
Yeah, and I do think we discovered some stuff, like some useful stuff organically,
Yeah,
but
100%. But sometimes it
some
is rough. Like I'm because I'm a player in another mystery, right? And so I
Mhm.
totally get when you're just like, wait, what the fuck's going on? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So I totally get that. But yeah, I will definitely. Um, I don't know if we'll need it next session, but like I'll keep it in my brain space to be like, hey, I'm going to implement basically a house rule, or like an action that you guys can do where it's like, if you get stuck or lost, you can roll on the conspiracy die, and like you guys can like learn bits of information by like investigating outside of like the normal. But yeah, I like that. That's
Yeah.
very cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's a good solution to a problem that even I was like, in the last session I was like, maybe I didn't give you guys enough information,
Mhm.
and I was gonna wait a little bit because like I wasn't sure where you guys even wanted to go, and that's one of those things. I don't want to like, again, I don't want to be heavy handed and be like, you should go this way, but like if you guys are really just spinning your wheels, I don't want you to stand there still either. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
I
for
like that.
sure. But yeah, how about you? Any house rules that you would implement or
Um, that's tough.
I mean, you're kind of the DM, so it's like a little bit of a different situation
Right.
because
I mean, currently, I so I've noticed in this campaign, I think partially it's due to the fact that we've had to go remote for 2020,
Mhm, mhm,
and
mhm,
those reasons. But I wish I could invoke more of that like backdrop role playing moments where like we can kind of like dive into your character's like natural progression in life, like those, you guys have been very focused on the mission, which is this doomsday sort of prophecy, and like, time is of the essence and blah blah blah. But I do miss the nuance and role playing side of it. And I've done a couple of these things that I've been calling midnight interludes, which are
mhm.
basically like, what is your character doing during this kind of off time that you have? And it's created some really cool moments, but I wish there was a way to do that with everybody at the table all enjoying that kind of like backdrop role playing moment. So like I I don't want to call it a beach episode because I don't necessarily want to do that, but like
Sure.
include some like moments where it's like, okay, you guys have like a moment to like rest and relax. What is it that you do during that to hopefully,
Yeah.
and I know initially a buddy of mine came up with a system where it's like, hey, if you come up with a really cool like plot point for yourself, whether it's like part of your backstory or it's something that you want to achieve or this or that, you get a point of inspiration during kind of like a fireside chat
Mhm.
where, however, finding a way to do that that doesn't feel like everyone's going to spend individually 60 minutes talking about their character. Like it's a tough balance, right, of like,
Yeah.
You want to keep the plot moving forward because there's lots of juicy bits and you got stuff planned, but also you want these characters to be embedded and feel real, and character growth is part of that. So I would try I think if I wanted to introduce a house rule, it would be a mechanical way to give you guys advantage by simply just telling more about your character, or having a scene with another character where nothing actually happens but we learn something very deep about your character or something, or even just about your relationship with the other character, or
Mhm.
something to that effect. I don't have the mechanics in mind, although I'm sure if I actually sat down and did it I could find something, but right now
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a blank on that one.
Yeah, for sure. That's cool. But
Yeah.
yeah. Do you have any other final thoughts on home rules or house rules or however you want to phrase that?
Yeah, I think my final, unless you have another question,
Oh
um,
no, no, no. I do not.
yeah, I think house rules are like DM's introduction to uh, building your own game.
Mhm.
I think at some point every dungeon master wants to tweak the rules and do stuff because it's kind of the like introductory level to game development. And I know, especially me as a kid, I really wanted to get into game development of some kind. I never ended up doing it. I ended up becoming an artist instead. But like, that's why I love tweaking with house rules and figuring out why things are the way they are in fifth edition, because it's like, it's kind of like, baby's first game development. And it's really fun. And obviously make sure everyone's cool with your tweaks and stuff, because there are a lot of house rules that are like very like gross and like counterproductive to what's going on. Like some people are like, "Oh, these classes are broken," and then do things that really kind of ruin the experience for that player. But like, I think house rules are fun and kind of a when you become a game master, a very natural way to explore being a game master further. So that's my thoughts. What about you? What is it about house rules that
Yeah.
makes you tick?
I mean, I think like with anything, flexibility is the key.
Yeah,
And just being open and honest in your communication with your fellow players and with your dungeon master, which I know is like something that can be a little intimidating
sure.
here and there. But I think that, if something's just not working for you, um, kind of bring it up. Not even necessarily like having to bring your own solution or things like that, but just bringing up what is it that you don't necessarily like, and sometimes you don't necessarily realize it until like the moment's gone, right?
Right, right.
Like I didn't necessarily realize the thing about popcorn initiative until we had been doing fast slow initiative for a while,
Yeah.
where I was like, oh, interesting, you know
Well, yeah,
kind of
because it
deal.
completely changed the dynamic. Like, it still added that teamwork aspect because you guys got to pick who went first and last and whatever. But it also added a layer of depth where like you guys really had to think about it. So
Yeah.
it solved a lot of problems and didn't necessarily like because everyone has to be involved. You kind of don't run into so much of like the favoritism, or like knowing like, oh well, I know my buddy wants to go next, so I'm going to pick them even though I should give it to the other person.
Yeah, but I mean, just like you said, pay attention, be open, and hey, if you find something as you're perusing the web that you think's kind of interesting, don't be afraid to at least toss it out there. The worst other people can say is no, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Um, but yeah, those are my final thoughts. Hey Cody, if people liked this episode and they wanted to learn more, where's a place that they can learn more?
They can go to our website at www.fandomroulette.com, where all of our shows are and a bunch of other stuff. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you can bring up questions that you'd like us to ask on Lore Masters by going to the bottom, filling out your internet tag or whatever, and then a question for Loremaster investigation.
And Cody, if people like the episode and they want to tell a friend, but they don't necessarily use the same pod catcher or pod app that they listen to, where are some places people can find episodes of our show?
We're on SoundCloud, YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, iTunes, all of your RSS podcatchers. All you got to do is search Fandom Roulette.
And are there places along on the social medias where people can find us to interact with us that don't necessarily involve sending us like an email or a form or something like that?
Yeah, we are on Twitter at fandomr_podcast, where we post updates about what we're doing on the shows and the Twitch streams and all that good stuff. And then you can also find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching Fandom Roulette.
Also, please remember to like, rate, review, and subscribe.
Yeah,
Um, like ring the bell, give us
share
a
this
good,
with a friend. Do
share
all
with a
those cool
friend,
things.
give us a fun, positive comment, things like that. Anything you can do to help us move up those ladders.
Yeah, the internet
Hooray.
hierarchy.
Woo. We want to thank you so much for listening to us. We know you can spend your time lots of places, and we thank you for choosing it with us.
Yeah.
But signing off for Phantom Roulette, this is Joe.
And I'm Cody.
And as always, stay nerdy.
Stay super nerdy.